Joining me now is Republican Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri. He just returned from a bipartisan trip to the region, including a stop at the Ukrainian border. Nice to have you on with us, Senator.
Hey, Pamela, nice to be with you.
Tell us first off, what deliverables would you like to see come out of this reported meeting?
Well, I do think President Zelensky's anticipation is right. Hard to imagine that the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense would go over there without something significant to add to what's going on. But frankly, just the fact that they're going over there adds a lot. That they're going to Ukraine, they're going to the country, they're showing their personal and visible support of our country and themselves for Zelensky is a good thing. But on the weapons side, I think we're at a point where we need to get the Ukrainians everything they need as soon as we can possibly get it to them. This is a really moment here where in the next couple of weeks, as the war changes to a more almost World War II kind of large land movements, it's going to be harder for the Ukrainians to disrupt that than it was the brilliant strategy they had to stop the Russians as they were concentrating on cities. We've, I think, also seen here a new way to look at warfare. Maybe the warfare of World War II is about over when you look at handheld, shoulder-held missiles, when you look at what drones can do that nobody's really seen actively engaged in combat before. And we need to be sure that they have all they need as soon as they need it. And it'll make a difference, I think, for a generation in Europe at what happens in the next few weeks, in the next few months in Ukraine.
The U.S. is sending over, most recently $800 million in military aid, and a week before that, $800 million in military aid. Do you think there should be more that the U.S. is sending over or doing at this point?
Well, I think we need to be sure that we're sending the right thing and it's getting there in the right way. There's some concern that the Ukrainian system of supply is still a little too Soviet in nature. The Soviet system was, everything took a lot of time and it took a lot of people because that was kind of how the Soviet Union worked. And helping them streamline what they do with these weapons when they get them and being sure that we're getting the right thing to the right place at the right time here becomes really important. And I think we're moving in that direction more. At first, it seemed to me that we were being driven by events more than we're driving events, but we may be to a moment now where President Biden and the Congress are in unity and driving events. On the trip I was on, Steny Hoyer, the majority leader in the House, put that trip together. He and I were whips together for about a decade, and we talked every day, and we've always had a great relationship. But on that trip, there were 5 Democrats and 4 Republicans, and any discussion on this topic, the people who we were talking to, whether they were from other NATO countries or from Ukraine or from Poland, couldn't have told, I don't think, who the Republicans were and who the Democrats were. There's a moment here, both in our country and maybe even more importantly in Europe, where everybody is back on the same page. And I think for several years there were real serious reasons to doubt whether our NATO allies were fully committed to the principles of NATO or not. And at least for now and hopefully any foreseeable future, they are fully committed.
I'm curious what you think the long-term prognosis is for Ukraine, also for the U.S., and whether in the short term you see the U.S. getting involved or NATO countries getting involved in implementing an embargo around the waters there, the Black Sea, given what we see Russia's strategy being.
Well, clearly the current Russian strategy is to try to take over the entire southern part of the country and maybe link up with Moldova, which then puts Moldova also at jeopardy. But the big economic impact of that is you really take away the ports that Ukraine has. Ukraine has a significant amount of the food exports in the entire world, and you eliminate the water capacity to get that done. You've changed that economy pretty dramatically. It'd be a mistake for us to let that happen. And there should be dramatic penalties on Russia if it does happen.
So does that mean that you think there should be an embargo on those waters, which is for our viewers similar to essentially a no-fly zone, right? But on the waters. And
well, the embargo is more of an economic impact, and I think we'd have to figure out exactly what that meant and how to do it. How do you enforce an embargo there? But there certainly should be significant economic penalties on anything that comes out of ports or land that's been seized in the aggressive and brutal way that the Russians are doing this. This is something I think after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, I think we had about 20 years where nobody had anticipated that certainly in Europe that you'd have a country so aggressively, so brutally, so publicly doing what Russia's doing right now. And I think there are war crimes involved, and in the court of public opinion, I think Putin is already guilty, but people are right now gathering the information they need to keep track of people that were brutalized, people who were shot in the back of their head with their hands tied behind their backs, and the thousands of innocent victims where you bomb schools and hospitals and residential apartment complexes. It's totally unacceptable, and Putin's going to come out of this, even if he's a victor, as a pariah, I think, to the other countries that Russia needs to deal with and surely would like to deal with.
do you think he will be a victor? Do you think he will be able to lock in?
I think the Ukrainians have a real chance to win here. They've shown a real desire to win. The three big surprises, I think, of the war have been how the Ukrainians have fought back, how poorly the Russians have performed, and really how the European countries have rallied around NATO, and how we've expressed again our real commitment to NATO. And I think that says a lot about what can happen. And if Putin wins, Europe will be a different place for a generation than if Ukraine wins, and we should see that Ukraine wins.
I want to ask you about Putin's state of mind, because you sit on the Intelligence Committee, and I know that it has been looking for clues as to his state of mind, how he's viewing this conflict. Based on what you know, do you think that Putin believes he is winning? And has the committee been given any insight into the reported detentions of senior FSB officials in Russia?
Well, I think that's important. Putin, surely this did not turn out the way he thought it would. No matter how detached he is from reality, if he is, he can't help but see that this is a big negative for his leadership and for Russia. And the Russian people may not know it, but the rest of the world does. So he's really got a couple of choices here. One's to blame the intelligence community, and the second is to blame the military. And right now he seems to be saying, look, we weren't told everything we needed to know about what would happen, and you're going to pay a price for that. And I'm not sure even Putin can take on very many of these strong entities in his own country and hope to continue to lead. But we'll see. He's been brutally in charge for 20 years. He's increasingly isolated. Those pictures we see of him sitting 30 feet away from everybody he's talking to, I think are an indication of his state of mind and maybe his detachment from the connectedness that most leaders in democratic countries have to have, but certainly under Putin, Russia's not a democratic country.
Very quickly, given what you just laid out there about the threat of Russia, why do you see China as the biggest challenge facing the U.S.?
Well, China's just more capable. They have, Russia without Ukraine is a middle-rate power at best. If you add Ukraine to Russia, suddenly you've got this great agricultural capacity as well as all the minerals and things that Russia has. But China has the capacity and the money. But I think China runs a risk here of joining Russia and Putin on the list of pariah states if they want to continue to go in lockstep with Putin. And they need to be paying close attention to what the Ukrainians have done and will do, even if Putin gets some sort of temporary control, as they think about what they might do with Taiwan.